Hey everyone, and welcome to Adorama Cinema. If you don't know me, my name is Julien, and I'm a director, DP, and a photographer here based on the East Coast. The goal of today's video is to get you shooting better handheld video. If you want to be a good camera operator, you need to be good at shooting handheld. And in today's video, we're going to help you do that. I remember when I first started in the world of video, and I saw these guys online, these leaders in the industry, operating handheld, whether it was on their shoulder or underslinging a big, heavy camera, either with or without an easy rig. I said to myself, I want to do that well. So what did I do? I just dove in. I hate to make it this simple, but it's going to take practice. It's going to take muscle memory. It's going to take you building your strength, and eventually you're going to get to become a really good operator. I want to stay in two lanes in this video in order to get you shooting better handheld. The first is what you can do to optimize your rig, and then the other is what you're going to need to do physically in order to stay steady. So let's start with the first. Most people just have a camera and don't think that you need to add anything more to this camera to get started. Grip the camera with your right hand on the camera grip. And take your left hand, not anywhere except for underneath the camera. That way you can let go of your right hand and still have a steady hold. Not only that, your left hand and fingers are in the perfect position to manually focus. I'm a huge fan of manual and vintage lenses and pulling my own focus. Yes, it's focus pulling, but when you're pulling your own focus, it's going to go hand in hand with operating. So as much as I'm encouraging you to practice your handheld movement and your steadiness, I'm also encouraging you to practice manually focusing. Next, depending on what you're shooting, you want to tighten up your core, kind of bring everything like your elbows into your body. You want to start with a strong base from your feet to your quads to your hips. Really work to brace the camera. If it works for you and the shot you're trying to get, adding a third point of contact by putting your eye up to the viewfinder would make you even more stable. And if you have a camera strap and you want to pull tension up against your neck, that's going to work well too. Let's move on to a bigger camera rig, something like this. By adding weight to the camera rig, a V-mount plate, a base plate, a battery, a monitor, a top handle, all of these things are going to help stabilize the camera. That's because the heavier the camera is, the more stable it is. This definitely doesn't mean like build it as heavy as possible. I have found that there is a weight limit, and that's going to depend on you and your style and where you are. I would say just try to start adding things, not just for the sake of adding, but actually adding power and a monitor and a base plate and a top handle. These things serve purposes and they make operating easier. I've had people ask me, why do you have rods if you don't have focus motors? Well, it's because it just gives me more real estate to hold on to. And what I do is I brace my pinky, ring, and middle fingers on the rod or the base plate, and then I'll use my thumb and index finger to pull focus on the lens. But again, don't feel like this is absolutely something you have to do. You can get really good at operating and you can practice for years by just having nothing but a camera. For the most part, if your camera does have in-body image stabilization, you're going to want to turn it on. The one time that you might want to turn your in-body image stabilization off is that when your camera is big enough, it's heavy enough, and you've really been getting good at operating, you're going to start to generate some really organic movement. And you might not need that in-body image stabilization anymore. If you want to get something ultra steady or almost looking like it's locked off, then you can just switch it back on. Lastly, something you can do in camera is shoot slow motion, whether that's 48, 60, or 120 frames per second. That slow motion is gonna really smooth out your shots and hide any imperfections. I will challenge you and tell you this though. That slow motion might become a crutch down the line. And I would encourage you to shoot as much 23:9:8 or 24 frames per second footage as possible. Now let's go over the things that you can do as an operator to get better. And it might not be what you think, but it starts with movement. Sometimes when you think of getting a handheld shot, we want to hold this thing so steady that it's just inevitable that there's going to be micro jitters and shake. And my tip is to add intentional movement to your handheld footage. This movement takes away any micro jitters and leaves you with a more engaging shot that might tell a better story. You're gonna have to figure out what type of movement is your favorite, and it's really gonna depend on the type of shot. For example, if I'm standing up, I can sway my hips back and forth and just get a shot from, let's say, 6 feet up. But things start to change when I wanna get low. Maybe I'm gonna get down on my knees and try to mimic that same left to right motion. Again, practice is going to eventually make you a great operator. I would encourage you to look at some behind the scenes videos of some of your favorite cinematographers and operators and see how they're physically moving. As you gain muscle memory and as you get stronger, you're gonna get a certain style and you're gonna figure out what works for you. The way you operate is definitely rig dependent as well. You can see it might look silly, but with this small mirrorless handheld rig, I've got the V-mount battery braced up against my chest, the back of the top handle braced against my chin, my right hand is on the camera and my left hand is pulling focus. It's not something I would do with every single rig, but it just seems to work perfectly with this one. I'm really comfortable shooting handheld anywhere between 35 and 50 millimeter. And I encourage you to start at about the same. Now you're probably asking, well, what happens if I wanna not move and hold something steady? Well, let's just do that and try that. So generally, when I shoot for coverage, I start with wide, medium, and tight shots. And if you wanna learn more about shooting better B-roll, you can go back to my previous video here on the Adorama Cinema channel. With, let's just say, a 35 millimeter lens, shooting handheld with stabilization on, I can sit back, hold the camera steady, and get that wide shot. If there's barely any little movement, that's fine for me. It's a handheld shot after all. As I go in tighter and tighter and tighter, that's where I really have to start to brace down and potentially start moving, motivated by my intentions, what I want to do and what I want to show. The real challenge is when you're looking for that ultra close-up or macro shot. That's when a handheld shot might get really tough to hold perfect. All right, so I'm gonna give you a list of movements to start with, and these are gonna be able to get you on your way. The first is going to just simply be holding still. Bracing with anything you can, whether it's your hands and your arms only, or the added eye for a third point of contact. Be creative. You can use your chin, your stomach, your chest, whatever feels good to you. Next, we're gonna sway side to side. And we're not gonna do this quickly. We're gonna do this slow to begin with. Next, we can pan and tilt with our arms and our hips. We can tilt up and down with our shoulders, or we can even raise or lower our entire body. Finally, one of my favorites, start with a strong base with one foot in front of the other, tighten up your core, and push just about as far as you can go in order to mimic a slider. Now these aren't all the movements that you're limited to, but I want you to start with these and get comfortable. Again, practice is going to eventually make you great, and some real fun can be had when you combine at least 2 of these moves into one. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this video helped. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll be sure to get to them. Remember, if you want to be a great operator, it's going to take practice and you've got to put the hours in. So get out there and I'll see you in the next one.